Well, if you spend any time in your GeoPro or your ePro and you have a year before 2021 and a half model, you'll have the little sink like I have here. It works pretty good, but it could be bigger and there could be more room. It's just a lot of wasted space in here. So I went ahead, I want to try to keep it as simple as possible, so I ordered mine from Forest River, and I will leave the information for where I ordered it on the description of this video. It's a little bit of a process. You've got to send some emails back and forth, your VIN number and all that to get it, but I'm hoping this was going to make it easier for me. I've already looked at, this is the new sink going in. It is 16 by 16, 6 inches deep. The faucet looks like it's not going to be a problem. It does have to have a hole drilled behind it because there's not a hole in the flange of this actual sink. So that'll be something I'll have to do. And the key for me is I want to keep this far back as I can because of the spice drawer I built in here. I'm going to try to maintain that spice drawer. Maybe have to take the back panel out of it. We'll just have to see how that's going to work out, because we want to put it in as tight as we can to the front and still maintain this spice drawer, and put it back as far as we can, but the nozzle, we don't want it messing with the shade here, so we're going to have it about as close as we can get back there. So that's going to be the trick to it. So next up, we've got to tear through, take our drawers out, get everything set up to work in small spaces. So that's going to be our biggest challenge on doing this project. So after taking out the drawer here, we got this little hole we're working through. Looking in here, we're probably going to take this trap out of here first. That'll have water in it, and we'll have to drain that into a bucket. We've got water connectors, but we're going to try to bring that up through the top. And then there's actually some brackets right there. I think there's 4 of those. We're going to have to unscrew those to get the sink loose, and then we'll have to actually break the seal up on top. I put some silicone in this edge here. We'll have to cut through that and pull that up. So we're going to climb up in there, and we're going to work on getting this trap out right now. That'll be our first job. So you'll see, took the trap out, and there it sits. Got a little water out of there. And you gotta make sure you don't get any water on your heater when you're doing that. Now if you look inside, and most people have that little plastic piece in here that only opens this drawer so far. If you do, you just need to push the 2 levers on the side and let this fall down. And in this case, I've got my added on drawer that I've put in here. And if you look up in there, you'll see that one of the screws that we have to undo, and there's another one on this side here, and then there's 2 in the back. Doesn't take much to loosen those up. About 3 or 4 turns and it's already loose, and you can swivel it around and get it out of your way like that. I've already done the one on this side, now I gotta get the ones in the back. One thing I didn't show you before, can be done now, but I already got the drain or the trap off the bottom, so you want to drain both these lines as best you can from the top, and maybe even go into a lower point down in the other part of the camper, like in the bathtub, and let some water out there. That way it pulls most of that water out of the lines and it won't be leaking on you the whole time you're trying to do this. Another thing you might want to do is, since I'm in the FD model, if you've got the shower, outdoor shower right there on the same set of lines, you might want to go out there and drain those lines until it quits draining out. So now we want to take a knife, and we want to be real careful, and we want to cut that silicone all the way around. So I stand corrected on how many clamps there were. I thought there was 4. There's actually 6. There's 2, one in the front, one in the back. So that popped loose, and so I went ahead and popped loose anyway. But just let you know, when you go under there, there's one on each side, and then one in the middle in the back, and one in the middle in the front. So at this point, we're going to take a pair of channel locks. We're going to reach up under here, and we're going to disconnect the cold and hot water lines, being careful that water doesn't drip out of there, and that way this whole thing will lift up. So there you have it. We got the sink out, loosen the 2 fittings here and here, and we didn't get too much water, which is a good thing. So now we're going to have to set up our template, which this sink from Forest River did not come with a template. So we're going to have a rough idea. It's 16-inch roughly, the sink 16 by 16, and I think it's going to be about 15 inches, but I'll give you a better estimate here in a minute when I do some measuring. But again, we're going to try to get it set in here where we can still use our spice drawer. We may take the back panel out of this spice drawer and use the actual back of the spice drawer will be actually the back of the sink. What's nice about this setup is the actual faucet here is actually going to be set up through the countertop back here, so we can hook all that up back here, and we could probably even give it a leak check before we even put our sink in. And so we'll just see how that works as we go. Now, if you watched any of my other videos where I made this spice rack, you'll see where I made this. I've decided I'm going to have to take that out because it's going to be too snug right now. I'm going to go ahead and take it out and get the sink in here. I will put it as close as I can, this sink back as far as I can this direction without running out of countertop. And then probably going to have to take this down and trim it down a little bit. I think I can get it down another inch. Now, from what I can see on the sink, there's no front, back, side, or anything on this. It's pretty much standard the same way all the way around. Everything seems to be the same, so there's no such thing as getting it in there wrong way because it's 16 by 16. So, got this taped off. Surprisingly enough, that big sink is not going to take up much more space than the other sink. If you look here, it's pretty much 1/4 of an inch on each side. It's going to be bigger. I just made it a little bit bigger than 1/4. I went to 3/8 on each side, and I stayed with the front edge, and then I went back 15 inches. This is how much it's going to extend in the back. So what I did to keep the mess down is I put a plastic bag in here. I taped it with some duct tape 4 different places around here. That way when I cut this, all that stuff don't fall in around that heater unit, and it just falls down here, and I can take a vacuum and sweep this up as we go. So there it is, dry fit in. Just got a little bit of play back and forth. Probably enough to get those brackets in there that hold that in. And now we got to worry about where we want to put our faucet at back here. Now we got to take out the bottom of the old sink. This piece here has a thread at the bottom, so we're going to thread that out. Use that in our new sink. So when you take that apart, you have a seal here for the bottom, seal on the top. So we'll get that fixed up on our new sink. I did get my spice drawer renovated. I had to do a little bit of modifications on it, take it out and modify it, but it's still going to work out pretty good. I just had to cut it back a little bit and cut it down and use the back of the sink for the actual back of the spice rack. So I got that put into the new sink. Worked out pretty good. I kind of snugged it up. Might have to tighten a little bit more. We'll do a leak check on it later, but don't want to do it too tight because it's plastic and it might strip the threads. Okay, so what I did is I got the center of the sink, which is here, and I want to go back far enough that I don't hit this edge on here, and I also don't want to hit when I put these blinds down. So got a mark here. I'm pretty happy with that. We have a drill bit, 1.25 inches. One thing you want to be careful of, and I almost didn't do it, was when I looked underneath here, there's actually some electrical wires. So you want to make sure those electrical wires are pinned back so you don't drill into them. So I'm going to have to take those and tack them back a little bit further back. So actually that 1.25" worked out just fine. It has plenty of play. That's probably about the right size you want to use. So what I'm doing with mine is you have choices here. You can have this lever turn around toward you, or I think Forest River does theirs where it's to the right side and you swing the head around this way. That way you can turn it hot or cold on this right hand side. So that's the way I'm going to do it. Now it doesn't have much instructions for this. Here's a breakdown of it on the sheet that came with it. This is kind of the parts one. Then on this side it kind of shows you how to mount it, but it's very limited on what it tells you. It doesn't even tell you what size hole to make. So it does tell me I need to use the 2 washers and a screw part, which is this. And here's the washer, and there's the one already inside of it, inside of there. So we'll put that in and mount that. We'll have to take the tape loose before I do that. So we'll take this little section of tape through loose here for right now. So got that installed, put it through, tighten it about as tight as I can, hand tight, because I'm not going to be doing much more sawing. So now what I got to do is I'm going to clean up this whole area, sweep it, get all the dust and dirt out of there, bring all my towels out, make sure there's no water down in the heater and things like that, get that all ready. And then I'm going to have to see how I can get these to work out with the new connections. I think they're going to do okay. I may have to swivel them around, and then I may have to do some adjustment on the trap here. I don't know if this has to slide a little further in. We can get some adjustment here, so we'll just have to see how that works out. But first off, we're going to clean up. Now the nice thing about this is you can do this before you put the sink in. You can check all these lines. So I've gone ahead and tightened these down. I haven't done them real super tight, but I've got them pretty snug. And so we're going to put a pan underneath here, tub like this here, and put that underneath there. We're going to test those out, see how well they do, if they leak or not. Might have to snug them down a little bit. I did have to swing these. They were sitting straight up, and I had to pivot them over to where I could get a good tightness without having to bind them too much. And then eventually when the sink goes in, it's going to push this whole part back in there like that. So I'll have to check it again to make sure that bind doesn't make it leak. Okay, just turn my water pump on, let the pump pressurize until it finally shut down. Now there will be air in these lines here. So far I have no leakage. I'm going to be prepared for a leak, and what I'm going to do is take this tub underneath the sink and get any of that air bled off, and then we'll check our lines again. So what I've done is I've gone around and I've bled off all the air in the sinks, in the tub, and then the outside in the shower. Just bled off any of that air. So now we're good all the way up to this point. So we're going to actually open up this and we'll see how much air and if we get any leaks. So far, no leaks. Okay, looking pretty good. Don't see any leaks. So if you look inside of there, you'll see if you put this on there, it comes out and it needs to be pushed back. So we're going to take our sink back out, and it looks like about an inch and a half. We have to push that back in there. This piece here has to be pushed back in, and if it don't fit back in, then we're going to have to cut that off. So we'll just see how that works out. So when I talk about that piece, we basically are going to loosen this nut up here, and we're going to try to push this in about an inch and a half. It'll give us a little bit more space in there. And we don't know how far that'll go up in there. If not, we may have to cut this, but we'll see how well that works out. So I was lucky enough to be able to push that in about an inch and a half. It worked out pretty good. I've got this just loosely fitting in here right now. I'm going to have to tighten up that back one, and then we'll tighten up these two once we put the sink in permanently. But we know it's dry fit now and it works in here. So I'm happy to say that we don't have to do any kind of modifications to our drawer. It goes right in, sits right underneath that trap, and I got the back carved out, so that kind of gives you that room for that trap. What I like about Forest River is they designed this sink to where you basically can put this new sink in. You really don't have to do a whole lot of mods. It pretty much fits in the spot, and you don't have to cut out the, like I say, if you buy an aftermarket, a lot of times you have to cut out the back of this drawer because your trap sits lower. But in this case, it's kind of the best of both worlds. It's not the huge sink that you get with some of the aftermarkets, but it is a lot larger sink. So I'm gonna like this because it's not nearly as hard to do this and not have to do any kind of crazy modifications. So we're just kind of getting these clamps together for the actual sink. This is how they fit in there. They fit into this tab here, and you go in and then you tighten this down up against there. If you noticed, I've also taken all my tape up. Also, while I was in here, I went ahead and snugged down this line here where I actually pushed this piece in to give myself more room. I tightened this one down. This one's not very tight because I might have to do some more juking around to get this in place. And so, but I got this one good and snugged down. I did one last leak check. I had a little bit of leakage on this hot water side, and I tightened that up a little bit, and we're good to go. If you notice on these clamps, the angle right here, it's a little hard to get these under your sink up at the top because of the close tolerances. So I had to bend it a little bit more in order to get this to snap into place. So it's just a little helpful hint there. Gotta be kind of careful because these can snap off. It's just a cheap metal and it can break off. So you just only bend it as little bit as you needed just to do that. Getting these clamps tight are kind of a pain. You got to reach up in here and you got to loosely install all of them. I got 4 of them on here, up and through here, and now I'm going to make sure it's even up on top and then cinch those down. Okay, the 4 clamps I put in, I did have to put this one up here. It's a little easier for me to get to. It shouldn't bother my spice rack up in here. And now I'm going to go in here and tighten up the traps, all the fittings in here, and then give myself another leak check. So I've run my water, let it run, fill up the trap, checked all my fittings down here, tightened those up. This one looks good, that one back there is good, all 3 of these are good. So my last test I have to do is put the drain in here and fill up the sink about half full to make sure this seal here is good. So I'm going to fill that sink up about half full. I've already checked it with about 1 inch of water in it. It's still holding good, but I'm going to go ahead and get a good full and then last check. Okay, I'm not the neatest person in the world, so I tape off my edges for my silicone. This is clear silicone. And if you look in here, you'll see I've just got a little bit of the metal showing and a little bit of the countertop showing. And what I'll do is I'll put a bead all the way around, use my finger to kind of smear it out, and then pull the tape off. Hopefully leave a nice edge on that. Okay, looks like I got this job completed. No leaks. Letting my silicone dry around the edges right now. I want to let you know that this is by far the best way to do an upgrade. If you want to do an upgrade to a larger sink, you can buy the ones on Amazon or other places. You're going to have to do some changes as far as the way it's set in there and alter your drawers and maybe your tubing and all that. The thing about Forest River and ordering this stuff from them is this pretty much fit right up against everything. I had to do a little bit of adjustment, but the actual hole was only about maybe a ½ inch wider, maybe 1 inch or 2 longer. So it's just utilizing the space more efficiently than the other sink. But it works out well with all the fittings, and so it was relatively easy. I mean, yeah, it takes time and just be patient with it. What I do like is I did get to still use my improvised drawer. I did modify it a little bit, but if you have that one that normally comes on this, it would easily fit in there, no problem. And my drawer there, I just had to do a little bit more cutting on it. That's about all I have for this modification. I would highly recommend it if you want a bigger sink, and it's not that hard to do. And I will leave all the information for how to get this from Forest River in the video description. It is a little bit of a process. I think all told, the shipping and everything, it's just a tad under $200 for the faucet and the actual sink. and then you do reuse a few things like your inside of here. So that's about all I have. And if you have any questions on this project, leave them in the comments, and we'll see you on another one of these, and hope to see you out camping this spring.